MacBook Air is a great computer. However, I do not recommend it for students. So in this video, I'm going to be telling you why I think the MacBook is the worst computer for students. So let's start with the most important thing for a computer, which is app support. The good thing is that most apps that students need will be available on the Mac. However, for people who take more technical courses like computer science or engineering, some apps that you use will not be available on Mac. So in my situation, in one of the classes we were doing databases. This class required constant access to Microsoft Access, which is the database app that we were using at the time. So of course, when I went to my Mac App Store and went to download Microsoft Access, I did not see it there, which was disappointing. So I searched all throughout the internet for an answer, and it turns out that Microsoft does not make Microsoft Access for the Mac. So the only way for me to access this was to either go to the library and use one of the computers, or I had to download a virtual machine. I had to go into the Mac and download Parallels, which was a virtual machine software, which cost $100 a year to subscribe to. I then had to download Windows 11 and install it on my computer. And keep in mind, I only have about 512 gigabytes of storage, so installing a whole new operating system took up a good chunk of my storage. And only then was I able to install Microsoft Access and be able to access that program. And that wasn't the only class. I also once did programming in Visual Studio, and Visual Studio is also not available on Mac. So I had to once again download VS Code, specifically on Windows, just to access this programming language. This was pretty annoying, but thankfully for most of the other classes, all I needed was basic Word and Google Chrome and PowerPoint. So for those classes, or most classes, this wasn't really a big issue. But still, make sure that you research what kind of apps you're going to need for certain classes and make sure that they're available on Mac. The second complaint is about the hardware. If you look at my MacBook Air, it has a nice and simple design, and when it comes to ports, you have 3 ports. You have a headphone jack and 2 USB Type-C ports. But if you look at a typical Windows laptop, they usually have multiple ports. And while in most cases, I never had a problem with the Mac's ports, there were a few situations where it was a bit annoying. So in some classes, they will ask you to do a PowerPoint presentation. So when you head over to the front of the room so that you can display everything on the projector, you'll find that most projectors out there use VGA connectors. Unfortunately, the Mac does not have this. So anytime you want to connect to a projector, you have to buy a USB hub or a dongle just to get access to these types of ports. So if you happen to forget your dongle on the day of the presentation, tough luck. It's kind of annoying, but it's not exactly a deal breaker. The next thing is not a hardware problem, not a software problem, just a social problem. When you have a MacBook, people are gonna think you're rich. And in some situations, that's not a good thing, because now people might beg you for money or something, right? Or they might want to steal stuff from you, which is not exactly a good thing. Now, of course, I'm guessing in America, this isn't really a big issue, but in other countries, you're basically a rich person if you have a Mac, so that's something to keep in mind, especially since MacBooks have a gigantic Apple logo on the back. Now, the next complaint is a real complaint that I think most people will understand. When it comes to buying a new MacBook, the cheapest MacBook out there, the M1 MacBook Air, is still pretty expensive. And if you live outside of America, then they're even more expensive because of taxes, and many countries don't get the discounts that people in America get when it comes to Apple products. But of course, if you're looking to save money, then the used market exists, refurbished exists, so you can get them for a bit cheaper if you look from that side. Okay, cool, but now you bought your MacBook, but you accidentally damage it. Well, it turns out that when it comes to repairs on Apple devices, they're also super expensive. For example, if you manage to crack the screen on your MacBook, the repair will cost $700, which is a lot of money. You could buy a whole new computer for that kind of price. So please, if you buy a computer, make sure to get Apple Care just in case. But what if you want an even cheaper Mac? Then you can look at a lot of older models, but you have to be aware of some issues. Some old MacBook Pros have a keyboard issue that was a big deal, and if it breaks, you have to go to Apple and hopefully they will try to fix it for you, but it's a reason why a lot of people avoid old MacBook Pros. Now, while some of the older Intel MacBooks have very powerful chips, they have another big problem, which is cooling. These laptops were designed to be as thin as possible, and that means that cooling was compromised. So many of these laptops get very hot during intense workloads. So hot in fact that they can be uncomfortable to use. And here's my best argument, which is Windows has the best options when it comes to bang for your buck laptops. And you don't have to spend thousands like you do with Apple. Let's say you had only $200 to spend on a laptop. If you try and buy a new laptop for $200, most of them are absolutely horrendous. But if you look at the used market, specifically with used Lenovo ThinkPads, there are many laptops available for $200 or less. You can have yourself a very good computer, which 90% of students will be happy with. I used to own an old ThinkPad which I got for $100 and it was really good, probably the best money I've ever spent. But hey, if you're still interested in a MacBook, then click on the link in the description and check out the prices for the M1 MacBook Air